The voicemail woke me out of dead sleep, a violent, choking sound followed by my mother's panicked voice screaming, "I can't breathe. Please come. Please come. I need you." I shot upright in bed, heart racing so loud it drowned out everything else. For a moment, I didn't even feel fully awake, just flooded with terror, adrenaline, and the sickening certainty that if I didn't move, she would die. I grabbed my keys, my phone, and I ran, barefoot until I hit the porch and realized I needed shoes. I didn't think. I didn't breathe. I just drove. Richmond, Virginia, at 3 a.m. Feels like a different universe, streetlights flickering, empty highways stretching like veins through a sleeping city. I sped through it all, hands shaking on the wheel, barely able to see through the tears blurring my vision. Every worst-case scenario shoved itself into my head: heart attack, stroke, collapse. I replayed the voicemail over and over, hearing her sobbing, gasping, begging. My mother wasn't dramatic. She wasn't a prankster. She wouldn't lie about this. Or so I thought. When I pushed through the ER doors, practically stumbling onto the check-in counter, the nurse behind the ER desk jerked in surprise. "My mom," I gasped. "She came in. She can't breathe. Her name is Melissa Harper, please. I need to see her." The nurse blinked, then typed quickly. Her expression shifted. Not alarm. Not sympathy. Confusion. She checked again. Then again. Finally, she looked at me and said the sentence that hollowed out my stomach like a punch. "Sir, there's no one here by that name." The world iced over. My legs nearly buckled. I grabbed the edge of the counter to keep myself upright, because everything inside me was screaming that something was wrong, horribly wrong. "No, no, that's impossible," I stammered. "She called me. She said she couldn't breathe. She told me she was coming here." The nurse shook her head gently, the way someone does when they're afraid you're about to break. "We haven't admitted anyone with that name tonight. I'm sorry." I felt my pulse hammering in my throat, my ears, my chest. For a split second, I thought she had died on the way. I pictured her collapsing behind the wheel, swerving into a ditch, alone, choking, terrified. I pictured headlights, an overturned car, an empty road. I pictured myself arriving too late. I pictured losing her forever. I ran back outside, scanning the parking lot like she might suddenly appear. I called her phone, no answer. I called again. Voicemail. My hands trembled as I dialed 911, ready to report a missing person. My voice cracked. I was seconds from collapsing into panic, when a thought tugged at me, unwelcome and impossible. What if she never came? What if she wasn't hurt? What if she wasn't dying? I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to even consider it. But the silence on the other end of her phone, the empty ER, the nurse's confusion, all of it, pointed to a truth colder than any medical emergency. She didn't disappear. She lied. And whatever her reason was, it was something far worse than illness. The drive back from the ER felt unreal, like someone had peeled the world away from me, and I was floating through a nightmare with my body eyes open. I kept replaying that voicemail. Every gasp, every scream, every desperate, choking plea. It didn't feel fake. It didn't sound staged. It sounded like a woman dying. And yet, the hospital had no record of her. No intake. No ambulance arrival. No Melissa Harper. So, if she wasn't there, if she wasn't dying, where was she? My name is Jordan Hale, 25, born and raised right here in Richmond, Virginia. I'm the youngest son in a family where the oldest left early, the middle disappeared into his own life, and I stayed behind, the responsible one, the safety net, the built-in, the caretaker my mother came to rely on so heavily that it didn't feel like reliance anymore. It felt like gravity. Gravity that kept pulling me back home, no matter how far I tried to run. For years, Mom called me for everything. A flickering light bulb? Jordan. A stubborn jar lid? Jordan. Her favorite show wouldn't load? Jordan. Her knee hurt. Her back hurt. Her head hurt. Jordan. Some of it was normal stuff children do for aging parents. But some of it always happened when I talked about leaving. Every time I tried to move out, every time I saved enough to put down a deposit, every time I brought up finding my own apartment, suddenly something went wrong. Mom fell. Mom fainted. Mom choked. Mom cried. Mom panicked. Some emergency, big or small, would appear out of nowhere. Always urgent, always terrifying, always perfect timing. But I didn't question it. Because who questions their mother's pain? I lived at home far longer than any 5-year-old wants to. Not because I was lazy, not because I had no ambition, but because every time I started to leave, life turned into crisis. I told friends I would move next month. Then next year. Then when? Things calmed down. But things never calmed down. Not once. They only escalated. And until tonight, I thought I understood why. I thought she was fragile. I thought she was unlucky. I thought she needed me. But standing in that empty ER, being told my mother wasn't there and hadn't been there, that cracked something. Something ugly. Something dangerous. On the drive home, a memory surfaced, a night 6 months ago when I told her I'd found a studio apartment. She collapsed in the bathroom 15 minutes later. 10 months before that, when I interviewed for a job in Norfolk, she fell down the front steps. A year before that, when I talked about college out of state, she said her chest hurt and I drove her straight to urgent care. Every attempt at independence was met with an emergency. Every emergency kept me home. I was the caretaker, the anchor, the youngest, and the one she clung to the tightest. For years I thought these crises were coincidence. Tonight, staring at my silent phone, a darker truth crept in. A truth I didn't want to believe. What if nothing was coincidence? What if nothing was an emergency? What if every crisis was manufactured? And the most terrifying part wasn't the lie. It was the possibility that she'd built our entire life around it. For months, I'd been trying to build a life outside the walls of my childhood home. A job offer in North Carolina wasn't just another opportunity, it was my first real chance at stability. A full salary, benefits, a future that didn't hinge on my mother's needs or moods or sudden illnesses. I spent nights researching apartments, mapping routes, imagining a life where my choices weren't dictated by fear. It felt like breathing for the first time. Until she yanked the oxygen away. The moment Mom heard about the offer, everything changed. She didn't congratulate me. She didn't smile or ask questions or talk about how proud she was. Instead, she clutched her chest like the news itself physically hurt her. She whispered, "You're all I have," with this trembling softness that stabbed deep into my ribs. Every time I brought up North Carolina after that, her eyes filled with tears. Big ones. Wet ones. Ones that slid down her cheeks with practiced ease. She cried so much it felt like she was drowning and dragging me with her. The guilt swallowed me whole. How could I leave her? How could I choose myself over the woman who raised me? Every moving box I packed seemed to crack her heart a little more. She sighed dramatically when she walked past them. She touched them like they were tombstones. She even asked me to wait a little longer, to think it through, to not abandon her. But abandonment wasn't the word for what she feared. Independence was. She sabotaged my job interviews in ways that felt almost accidental until they weren't. I'd be in the middle of a Zoom call, answering questions, trying to impress the hiring manager, when suddenly my phone would erupt with a series of frantic calls. If I silenced it, the house phone would ring. If I ignored that, she'd bang on my door crying that she felt faint. One interviewer actually asked, "Is everything okay there?" Everything wasn't okay. But not for the reasons I thought. I still believed it was coincidence. Stress, anxiety, bad timing. I didn't think my own mother would sabotage something I worked my entire adult life to earn. I didn't think she'd fear losing me so much she'd break the very thing that could save my future. I didn't think she'd weaponize her fear like a cage. Then came the voicemail. Her voice shaking, gasping, terrified. "Jordan, I can't breathe, please come. Please come, I need you." I remember the way my chest caved in, the way panic swallowed reason whole. At that moment, nothing mattered, except getting to her. Not the job, not the move, not the future. I thought she was dying. I thought this was the moment everything snapped. And in those 30 minutes I sped toward the ER. I hated myself for being so far away even though I'd only been across town. I cursed myself for packing, for planning, for daring to imagine a life where I didn't wake up to her needs every morning. I blamed myself for not seeing it sooner. Not seeing her pain. Not seeing her fear. Not seeing her slipping away. But she wasn't slipping away. She wasn't dying. She wasn't struggling to breathe. She was setting the perfect trap. And I didn't know it yet. But that voicemail wasn't a cry for help. It was a warning shot aimed at my freedom. I was still standing in the ER lobby, voice cracking as I tried to convince the nurse to check again, to call someone, to look one more time, anything, when my phone started vibrating in my pocket. I didn't even think. I snatched it out, hoping, praying it was a doctor, an EMT, someone telling me where she'd been taken. But the screen lit up with a name I wasn't expecting. Mom. My lungs squeezed tight. I answered so fast. The words tangled in my throat. Mom? Mom, where are you? The hospital has no record of you. What happened? But the voice that came through the speaker wasn't wheezing, gasping, or choking. It wasn't weak. It wasn't panicked. It was perfectly normal, annoyingly normal. Like she had just woken from a nap. "Jordan, honey," she said calmly, almost relieved. "Thank God you're not in North Carolina. What if this had happened when you were gone?" My blood froze mid-vein. The ER noise faded. The lights blurred. Every bone in my body went rigid. Her words didn't match the voicemail. Her tone didn't match the crisis. It was like hearing a recording over a live voice, two different realities colliding in my ear. "Mom," I said slowly. "What do you mean? Where are you? Are you safe?" She chuckled. Actually chuckled. "I'm fine, baby. I'm at home resting. Home. Resting. Not gasping for air. Not fighting for breath. Not dying." Something cold and heavy slid down my spine as the truth began stitching itself together. "Mom," I whispered. "You said you couldn't breathe." She sighed dramatically. The kind of sigh she uses when she's scolding me for worrying too much. "Oh, Jordan, I just felt a little dizzy earlier. I didn't want you driving too far away in case something really happened." My jaw clenched so tight it ached. She didn't deny it. She didn't apologize. She didn't sound embarrassed. She sounded satisfied, relieved that her plan worked, relieved that I was still in Richmond, relieved that I hadn't slipped out of her reach, relieved that I came running. I stepped outside into the cold night air, the hospital doors sliding shut behind me. "Mom," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "You said you couldn't breathe. You were screaming." "Well," she said lightly, "I got scared. That's all. You know how it is." But I didn't know. Not anymore. Not after tonight. My pulse throbbed in my temples. "Did you call an ambulance?" "No." "Did you collapse?" "No." "Did you go to the ER?" A pause. Then, "No, sweetheart. I just needed you to come home. Just needed you." The phrase sank into my stomach like a stone. Standing under the floodlights of the ER parking lot, it hit me full force, bone deep, undeniable. She hadn't been fighting for breath. She hadn't been in danger. She hadn't been dying. She faked the entire emergency. Every scream, every gasp, every plea. Not because she was scared of losing her life, but because she was scared of losing me. And for the first time, I realized the truth I'd been too afraid to see. She didn't fear illness. She feared my independence. And tonight was just the beginning of what she was willing to do to stop it. I drove home with my hands trembling on the steering wheel, knuckles pale, jaw clenched so tight it felt wired shut. The anger didn't hit all at once, it simmered, built, rose like boiling water. Fear churned beneath it. Not fear of losing her. Fear of what she was capable of. Fear of what she had just proven she would do to keep me from leaving. By the time I pulled into the driveway, my heart was hammering loud enough to drown out my thoughts. The house was dark when I walked in. Too dark. Too quiet. Not the kind of quiet that follows a crisis, the kind that feels staged, manufactured. I stepped into the living room, and there she was, Mom, sitting on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, eating soup, watching one of her late-night drama shows. The picture of comfort. The picture of calm. The picture of someone who had never gasped for air in her life. A scene so normal it twisted my stomach. She looked up and instantly switched modes. Hand pressed to her chest, eyelids fluttering, voice soft and shaky. "Oh, sweetheart, you came home so fast. I'm still feeling a little weak." "No, not tonight." Something inside me snapped. Not a loud break, not a scream, just a clean internal fracture. The moment a person stops believing the story they've lived in for years. I walked past her without a word. I didn't trust myself to speak. I didn't trust that if I opened my mouth, I wouldn't say something I could never take back. The hallway felt suffocating, my vision sharp, hyper-focused. That's when I noticed something small, something out of place, something that didn't belong at all. A little blinking red dot in the dark. I froze. My stomach dropped like I'd missed a step on the stairs. There, mounted discreetly in the corner of the hallway, pointed directly at my bedroom door, was a baby monitor camera. I stepped closer, heart pounding in my ears. I recognized the model. It was the kind young parents used to watch. Infants sleep. But it wasn't watching an infant. It was angled toward my room with precision. She wasn't watching for emergencies. She was watching me. My chest tightened. My palms went cold. I touched the camera, and it swiveled slightly, the kind that streams video to a phone. How long had it been there? How many nights had she monitored my comings and goings? Had she watched me pack boxes? Had she seen the suitcase I kept by my bed? Had she listened to job calls? Had she been spying on me every time I stepped out? I turned around slowly, dread rising like smoke in my lungs. If there was one camera, there might be more. In the kitchen? The living room? My car? My phone? Every instinct screamed that this wasn't over, that this wasn't a one-time stunt, that my mother had crossed from emotional manipulation into something far darker. Surveillance. She didn't just want me home. She wanted control. She wanted oversight. She wanted access to every movement I made. And the most terrifying part wasn't the baby monitor itself. It was realizing this might not be the first camera she installed. I didn't storm back into the living room. I walked, slowly, deliberately, like someone approaching an animal they finally realize is dangerous. Mom was still curled on the couch, blanket pulled up to her chin, spoon halfway to her mouth. When she saw me holding the baby monitor camera, her face didn't show fear. It showed calculation. A split-second panic masked under a trembling lip. "Mom," I said quietly, "what is this?" Instantly, she burst into tears. Big, dramatic, chest-heaving sobs that practically echoed off the walls. "You scared me," she wailed. "Why are you yelling? Why are you acting like this?" I wasn't yelling. I wasn't even breathing. But the tears weren't for her guilt. They were a shield. When I held up the camera again, she recoiled like it burned her. "You're overreacting," she sniffed. "It's just for safety. I needed to know when you were home." "For safety?" I repeated, my voice shaking. It was pointed at my bedroom door. She dabbed her eyes with the blanket. "I worry about you. What if someone broke in? What if something happened while you slept?" But her story cracked immediately. She hadn't installed it when I was a teenager, or during the pandemic, or when crime supposedly spiked. She installed it now, the same month I started packing to leave. She saw the knowledge settle behind my eyes. And that's when the guilt grenade started. "You're abandoning me," she sobbed, clutching her chest like I'd shot her. "You want me to rot in this house alone? You want me to die without anyone caring?" The words were knives, and she aimed every one of them straight at the softest parts of me. But she didn't stop there. She leaned in, voice cracking, trembling, dripping with martyrdom. "After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me?" My stomach twisted. Everything she'd done for me had strings attached. Strings thick enough to choke. "Mom," I whispered, "you pretended you couldn't breathe just to stop me from leaving." She froze. Her crying paused. Not naturally, but like a switch had been flipped. For a second, her eyes went flat, cold, calculating. Then she inhaled sharply and launched into another sob. "I was scared. I needed you. Nobody else cares about me, only you. And now you're throwing me away." Not once did she apologize. Not once did she acknowledge the baby monitor. Not once did she admit she staged a life-threatening emergency. Not once did she own a single part of what she'd done. Instead, she twisted the entire confrontation into a dagger aimed at one place. My sense of responsibility. Guilt wasn't her defense mechanism. Guilt was her weapon. Sharper than any knife. More precise than any lie. And as she cried into her blanket, accusing me of abandonment, something in me finally shifted. A realization heavy and sickening. My mother didn't fear losing me. She feared losing control of me. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the blinking red light of the baby monitor. Every time I inhaled, I heard her scream from the voicemail. Every time I tried to calm down, I remembered the way she clutched her chest and accused me of abandoning her. The house felt haunted, not by ghosts, but by manipulation. By morning, I needed answers I knew she wouldn't give me, so I called someone who would. Her primary care doctor had known our family for years. He treated her through flu seasons, checkups, routine tests. He wasn't dramatic. He wasn't emotional. He never exaggerated. If there was something medically wrong with her, he would know. When he picked up, I explained everything: her voicemail, the supposed breathing attack, the ER confusion. My voice was shaky, embarrassed even, but I had to know the truth. Did she have any episode? Any diagnosis? Any breathing problems? The silence on the other end wasn't concerned. It was bewildered. "Jordan," he finally said, "your mother has no history of respiratory issues." My stomach twisted, but he wasn't done. "She has no panic disorder, no asthma, no cardiac events, nothing that would explain what you're describing." The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. I gripped the phone tighter. "Are you sure?" She said she couldn't breathe. She sounded like she was dying. He sighed. Not harshly, but with the weight of someone who had been watching. A problem grow quietly in the shadows. Jordan. She's been coming in very frequently the past year insisting she's dying, but all tests show she's fine. My breath caught. He continued, voice low. She asks for scans we don't recommend. Says she feels faint, but her vitals are normal. Says she can't breathe, but her lungs are clear. Says she's dizzy, but neurological tests show nothing. We've tried to reassure her. She becomes distressed when we tell her she's healthy. My pulse hammered in my ears. She isn't sick, he repeated. She believes, or wants to believe there's always something wrong. My throat tightened as the truth spilled in like ice water. She wasn't seeking treatment. She was seeking attention. Every collapse, every fall, every accident, timing itself perfectly with my milestones. Every panicked cry whenever I tried to leave. Every sudden, like ailment when I talked about independence. Every urgent symptom that evaporated the moment she had me near. None of it was medical. None of it was accidental. None of it was fate. It was strategy. She's using illness as, what? I whispered, but the answer was already forming. A coping mechanism, the doctor said gently. But that wasn't the whole truth. Not for me. Mom didn't use illness as a way to cope. She used it as a leash. A leash to yank me back when I drifted too far. A chain she wrapped around my life, link by link. A trap she built so carefully I didn't notice until it snapped shut. I thanked the doctor, hung up, and sat there in the quiet of my car with my hands trembling in my lap. She wasn't dying. She wasn't ill. She wasn't the victim of her body. She was weaponizing it. And the scariest part wasn't that she faked being sick. It was realizing she might have been doing it my entire life. By the time I pulled into the driveway, it felt like my entire chest was vibrating with anger sharpened by clarity. The doctor's words replayed in my head like a metronome. She's fine. No breathing issues. No medical event. If she was healthy, then every crisis I'd rushed home for, every emergency she'd staged, every trembling call I'd answered, none of it had been real. Not one. And the truth settled in my bones like something poisonous. She never wanted help. She wanted control. I walked inside with a notebook, full of dates, symptoms, incidents, my own personal autopsy of the manipulation she'd stitched into my life. Staged falls, fake fainting spells, hour-long asthma attacks she never had medication for, dramatic phone calls begging me to come home. I had proof, patterns, a timeline of emotional traps disguised as medical emergencies. She wasn't helpless. She was strategic. She was in the kitchen, eating a snack, humming softly like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't dragged me out of bed the night before with a fake medical crisis. Like I hadn't found a camera aimed at my bedroom door. The sight of her calmness made something hot twist inside my chest. Mom, I said, voice shaking but steady. This ends now. She turned slowly, blinking innocently like a child caught sneaking cookies instead of orchestrating a psychological cage. What ends, sweetheart? I set the notebook on the table. I'm leaving. Her face collapsed so instantly, so violently, it almost looked rehearsed. She staggered backward, hand flying to her forehead. And then dramatically, loudly, unmistakably she dropped to the floor. Not fainted. Not unconscious. Just dropped. Crying so loudly the sound ricocheted off the walls. Within seconds, the neighbors peeked out their doors. She screamed, "He's abandoning me. He's killing me. My own son is killing me." Her voice cracked with theatrical agony, echoing across the yard. She clawed at the floor, sobbing, gasping again, pretending she couldn't breathe. But this time, I saw the performance. I saw every exaggerated inhale, every strategic wail, every calculated glance to see who was watching. "You're heartless," she shrieked, pointing at me like I was a murderer. "You want me to die alone? You want me dead?" The neighbors stared at me, wide-eyed, confused, ready to assume the worst. She wasn't just faking an emergency now. She was building an audience. When guilt didn't work, she escalated. When tears didn't work, she weaponized shame. And when none of that worked, she picked up her phone. Right in front of me, she dialed my job's number. "Hello," she sobbed into the phone. "My son Jordan, he's unstable. I'm scared for myself. I'm scared for him. He's acting dangerous." My blood went cold. She wasn't just trying to stop me. She was trying to destroy my ability to leave it all. To make me lose my job, my stability, my future. She wasn't building obstacles. She was blowing up every escape route I had. As she cried into the phone, manufacturing crisis after crisis, something inside me finally calcified. She wasn't sick. She wasn't scared. She wasn't desperate. She was in full control, and she liked it. And standing there in that doorway, neighbors watching, my job on the line, my freedom hanging by a thread, I realized something undeniable. If I didn't leave now, I never would. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I couldn't, but because I didn't dare. Mom eventually exhausted herself from crying, screaming, and calling my job, and she retreated to her bedroom, slamming the door like I was the one who had wronged her. Silence settled across the house, heavy and unnatural. It wasn't peace. It was the eye of a storm. And I knew the second she woke up, the cycle would start again. So at 4 a.m., with adrenaline still buzzing in my veins, I started packing, not frantically, not chaotically, quietly, carefully, like someone disarming a bomb. I folded clothes I hadn't worn in months, gathered documents she never let me keep in my room, stuffed toiletries into a worn backpack. Every item I touched felt like reclaiming a piece of myself, pieces she'd chipped away with guilt, fear, and fabricated illness. I didn't pack everything. I didn't need to. Freedom weighs less than captivity. And I was done carrying her weight. Before I walked out, I sat at the kitchen table, the same place where she had cried, accused, manipulated, and controlled me for years. I grabbed a sheet of paper and wrote the only words left in me. I love you, but love isn't control. You need real help, not me as your hostage. It wasn't written out of anger. It was written out of truth. Truth she had twisted for so long that speaking it felt like breaking a curse. I left the note beside her favorite mug. The house was dark and still, but I felt her presence everywhere, her need, her fear, her dependency, her surveillance. I felt it watching me even as I slipped out the front door and locked it behind me. I didn't look back. If I did, I knew I might freeze. I turned off my phone as I got into the car. I needed silence. I needed distance. I needed to breathe without the weight of her voice in my ear. The highway stretched ahead like a promise I had never been allowed to chase. I drove south toward nothing specific, toward nowhere in particular, but away from everything that had been suffocating me. 3 hours passed in a blur of asphalt and sunrise. When I finally turned my phone back on at a rest stop, it vibrated so violently it slipped in my hand. 52 missed calls. Voicemails stacked on top of each other, like emotional grenades waiting to explode. The previews alone told a story. Sobbing, screaming, pleas, threats, accusations, whispers, angry rants, shaking breaths, guilt-soaked monologues. And the final one, a chilling quietness. Every tool she had ever used to keep me close, she had thrown into those messages. But I didn't press play. Not because I didn't care, but because caring had become another chain. I put the phone face down on the passenger seat and stared at the horizon. She wanted to pull me back with panic. She wanted to drag me home with fear. She wanted to make me responsible for her emotions again. But I kept driving, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't running from her. I was running toward myself. 6 months feels like a lifetime when you've spent years living in someone else's shadow. 6 months of waking up without panic buzzing in my chest. 6 months of unlocking a door that belongs to me. Not a house filled with hidden cameras and staged emergencies. 6 months of choosing breakfast because I'm hungry, not because my mother's voice is calling me from the next room. I didn't realize how many pieces of myself I'd had to bury just to survive her control until I finally lived without it. Stability didn't just find me. I built it. I got a job. A real one. Steady pay, steady hours. Coworkers who know me as Jordan, not the son who can't leave his mother. My apartment is small, but it's mine. My dishes don't get moved. My lights don't get turned off to make me panic. The air doesn't feel heavy. The walls don't. Watch me. I sleep through the night without waiting for a scream, a collapse, a Jordan, help, echoing down the hall. Freedom isn't loud. It's quiet. So quiet it feels like oxygen. Mom still messages me. Not every day, every few days. Just enough to tug at the threads she once wrapped around my throat. Remember who raised you. You'll regret this when I'm gone. I'm sick again, but I guess you don't care. Don't forget me when I die. But texts that used to send lightning bolts of guilt through my body now land differently. They don't feel like emergencies. They feel like strategies, patterns, chains disguised as heartstrings. I read them with distance now, not cruelty, not hate, just clarity. I see the language for what it is. Emotional mines placed exactly where she thinks I might step. She's still trying to pull the lever she once held, still trying to trigger the reflex she trained into me for years. But I don't respond the way I used to. Because she doesn't own that reflex anymore. I still love her. That part hasn't changed. Love doesn't vanish just because truth arrives. But love isn't a leash. Love isn't a cage. Love isn't supposed to suffocate the person giving it. Therapy helped me understand something I never considered. My mother didn't want a son. She wanted a lifeline, a shield against loneliness, a built-in caretaker, a permanent emotional crutch. And I had to break my own heart to accept that I couldn't be those things without losing myself in the process. Sometimes I think about going back, just to talk, just to try again. But then I remember the ER at 3 a.m., the hidden camera blinking, the screaming in front of the neighbors, the calls to my job claiming I was unstable. And I know going back wouldn't be love. It would be surrender. So I choose distance, not punishment, not revenge, just self-preservation. I love her, but I won't be her prisoner. Not anymore. Because the greatest freedom I ever found was the freedom to leave before I lost myself completely.